So we continue our journey with Joan Chittister in the heart of the temple. And today she's talking about prayer. And we're reading a scripture about prayer. Keep in mind that Joan Chittister was a Benedictine nun. And so this is her background and her experience, and much of what she talks about in this book tends to come from a more monastic point of view. And so when she speaks of the religious life here, or being a young religious, that's where that comes from. When we are young religious, we say our prayers. When we get older in the religious life, we go to prayer. But when we begin to see prayer as the undergirding of life, the pulse of the universe in the center of the soul, we become a prayer. First, as Gandhi says, we have words and no heart. Finally, we grow into a heart without words. The truth is that the way we pray says something about what we believe about God and about what we believe about life itself.
And when you pray, don't behave like the hypocrites. They love to pray standing up in the synagogues and on street corners for people to see them. The truth is, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go to your room, shut the door, and pray to God, who is in that secret place. And your Abba God, who sees all that is done in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, don't babble like the Gentiles. They think God will hear them if they use a lot of words. Don't imitate them. Your God knows what you need before you ask it. This is how you are to pray. Abba God in heaven, hallowed be your name. May your reign come. May your will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us today the bread of tomorrow. And forgive us our debts, as we hereby forgive those who are indebted to us. Don't put us to the test, but free us from evil. If you forgive the faults of others, Abba God will forgive yours. If you don't forgive others, neither will Abba God forgive you.
Would you pray with me? Holy One, help us to learn and to grow, to continue to evolve spiritually through the scripture, through our experiences, through our study, through our conversations, through our deep knowing connection with your light. And may the words of my mouth, the meditations of each of our hearts, be filled with wisdom and grace. Amen. So over the years, you have graciously allowed me to preach what has been in my heart, what has been my experience, what I've studied. And I thank you for that. I know we've not always agreed, but in this place, we know that it's okay to disagree. And I appreciate the richness of the diversity of our ideas and our theology and our understandings and our thoughts. So having said that, I have a great deal of trepidation about preaching this sermon. And so I'm just going to lay that out there. Okay? Prayer is a difficult subject. And I am at a different place in my journey with prayer than I was a long time ago. And I've probably been in this place for a while now. I just haven't given voice to it. But the disclaimer is, if this doesn't make sense for you and doesn't work for you, just let it go. This is where I am today. May not be where I am tomorrow. But all I can do is tell you where I'm at now. Okay? So, I have a confession to make. I have always wanted to be someone who prayed well and diligently. And I am not. Whenever I visited somebody who is really good about praying before every meal, I've always felt sort of a sense of guilt and shame because it was not ever something I did in my growing up or when I raised my children. I didn't kneel beside the bedside with them and teach them their nighttime prayers. And so I'm pretty sure that's 2 black marks against me right there. Professionally, I have always tried to be the praying pastor that everybody wanted and expected. I have prayed hundreds of prayers in the last 20 plus years. I have laid on hands, I have blessed babies and animals and motorcycles and houses and communion elements and all kinds of other things. I have tried to do what I thought I was supposed to do, but a lot of times it has felt very awkward for me and not quite right. I've tried. I have tried diligently. But there have been many things that have happened over the years that have caused me to question the mode of prayer and the expectation of prayer and to doubt the whole process. And so let me share a couple. When I was 17, and I was in the hospital room on the other side of the curtained partition from my mother when she was dying of breast cancer. She coded, and everybody and their brother rushes into the room when that happens. And I'm 17, sitting on the empty bed on the other side, not having been brought up in the church, and yet resorting to prayer. And I prayed that my mother would die. I prayed that God could just take her out of the misery and out of the pain. And she died later that day. Is it because I prayed for her to die? Or is it just because it was time? When I was in my 20s, my 24-year-old then brother-in-law got very sick and went into cardiac arrest. And I sat with the family in the waiting room, and we prayed the rosary for a long time. Praying for healing, praying that Pat would be kept alive. Well, Pat had severe brain damage and lived for the next 20 years pretty much as a vegetable before he finally passed away at 44. Did our praying condemn him to this life of vegetation? Did the praying keep him alive like that? Is that what God does? Or did it just happen that way? Fast forward a number of years, as a pastor, and I was asked to lead a private prayer service with laying on of hands for a young mother who was dying of cancer. And of course I said I would, but I felt like I was setting myself up for failure. I felt like a fraud. I didn't have the power to heal anybody. And I had not experienced God to grant us instantaneous healing whenever we prayed for it. But we did the service, we laid on hands, we gave her love, we gave her support, we prayed for her. And she still died. Did I fail? Was it my lack of faith that failed? Or did it just happen? Where was God? John Shelby Spong talks a lot about his struggles with prayer. And he said what finally clinched it for him was in 1981 when his first wife was diagnosed with cancer and pretty much told it would be fatal. Well, being a bishop, everybody knows who the bishop is, and so word went out and all the churches in the Episcopal diocese where he was at prayed for him, prayed for his wife, the media picked up on it, people everywhere were praying for her. And she went into remission, and she lived for another 6 years. But as news of this prolonged remission got out, people started to take credit. Oh, God listened to our prayers. Isn't God wonderful? God answered our prayers. And Bishop Spong kind of took a step back and said, while the support and the love and the care was all wonderful, having a really hard time with this taking credit for it. And God answered your prayers. And he said he started to think to himself, what if a sanitation worker in Newark, New Jersey's wife was diagnosed with the same disease, but didn't have all of these churches to pray for her, didn't have media coverage so all kinds of people could pray for her, didn't have the status of being a bishop, maybe not even a connectedness in a church. Does that mean that maybe she'd die right away? Does it mean she'd have more pain in her illness? Because there weren't any prayers to answer, or so many prayers to answer. So is that the capricious nature of God, to answer just prayers of those who have some status? And is that the type of behavior he wanted to attribute to the God that he knew and loved and preached about? And he said, no, absolutely not. In the scripture today, we have Jesus teaching people how to pray. And that prayer has been adapted a little bit and is now the Lord's Prayer that has been said by millions and millions of people for centuries. It's like the Christian go-to prayer. But the world has evolved, and theology has evolved, and our understanding of God for many of us has evolved. And there are ways in which that prayer does not work for me anymore. And And some of that is why we do alternative Lord's prayers and hear different ways of setting that on Sunday mornings. But because it's so familiar and comfortable to many of us, that's why we do it in the traditional way on Communion Sundays. We've had some folks who wouldn't stay here because we didn't say the Lord's Prayer traditionally every Sunday. But for myself, specifically because I've gone beyond the concept of a theistic God, a being sitting up in the clouds, separate from all of us and watching over us, those first couple of lines don't work for me. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Spoke of an ancient time when God was male, lived in the clouds, and desired his name to be praised and to be honored. And God would then judge whose sacrifices and offerings and righteousness and the quality of their prayers deserved for them to be blessed and rewarded. And I can't do that for myself. It's not where I am. If you read other pieces of that passage, before that Lord's Prayer part, Jesus talks about charity. He talks about charity, and then he talks about prayer, and then he talks about fasting. And in all three places, he says, don't do it out in public. This isn't for show. This isn't, to give your ego a nice little trip. What I find interesting is he says, all those people who do that out in public, they'll get their reward. Well, what is their reward? Their reward is recognition, and I get to, pat myself on the back and say I was good and holy, and I get my ego stroked or whatever. So when you give and when you pray and when you fast, do it in private. It's between you and God. And you will also have your reward. But that reward, I believe, is an interior reward. It's being filled up from the inside. It's knowing a connection to the divine. And I think that's what Joan Chittister talks about in that little section that I read you. Said it's not so much about saying our prayers or going to our prayers. It's about a connection with the pulse of the universe in the center of our soul. Isn't that beautiful? I love that line. The pulse of the universe in the center of our soul, not out there, up there, somewhere far away, but in here, right here, connected to me. And prayer is knowing that connection. It's not so much about words, it's about heart. And it's about a deeper knowing. She quotes Gandhi, who says, words without heart are empty and meaningless. You can recite any prayer you want, but if your heart isn't there, what good is it? He says, heart without words is much better. That's what prayer is about, to have that heart connected. There's a story about Brother Bruno. And Brother Bruno was trying to pray his prayers one night. And he had the window cracked and there was a bullfrog croaking outside the window. And he was getting very upset that this bullfrog was disturbing his quiet prayer time. So he finally threw open the window and he yelled outside, he said, "Be quiet!" And because Brother Bruno was a saint, all of creation quieted. So he could have stillness and silence for his prayer. But as he was praying, he heard this inner voice say, "What if God is as pleased with the croaking of a bullfrog as the chanting of the Psalms?" And Brother Bruno said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Who wants to listen to the croaking of a bullfrog?" And the voice came back and said, "Why would you think God would invent the sound?" And Brother Bruno gave in and he threw the window open and he yelled back outside and he said, "Sing!" So the bullfrog, accompanied by all of the other frogs in the vicinity, started to sing. and croak. And as Brother Bruno sort of relinquished himself and immersed himself in the sound, he realized that it actually enhanced the sound of the silence. And with that discovery, his heart was in harmony with the entirety of the universe. And for the first time ever, he thought that he really knew what it meant to pray. To have your heart in harmony with the universe. To become a prayer. To pray with your heart. So I started to think about that connection. You know, prayer is a connection to the divine, however you understand it, whether it's your higher power or spirit, or God or goddess, or an essence, or an energy, however you understand that connection. What fosters that connection? And I thought about how Jesus was probably one of those people who was really, really connected a lot of the time. And how did that manifest? If you look at Jesus' life, how did that connection with God manifest? This is your question of the day. How did he live that connection? But how? How did he treat people? How did he live? With love? With compassion? What? Serving others? Not being egotistical above other people? Welcoming the outcasts, being inclusive, wanting to free the oppressed, gathering the children up on his lap. All of those things showed his connection to the divine. So in my understanding of that, he lived his prayer. If connection to the divine is prayer, then every time he was compassionate, he was in prayer. Every time he gathered a child into his lap, he was in prayer. Every time he spoke out against oppression, every time he spoke to a woman, every time he touched the leper, he lived a prayer from his heart in harmony with the universe. And that's where I want to be. The words fall short for me now. I want to live as a prayer. Gang, I fall short all the time. But I have to keep trying. I believe in the harmonious universe that we are a part of, that pulses in the center of our soul. I believe in that mysterious energy or essence that flows through all of it that somehow brings sometimes synchronicities into our lives that I can't explain. And I pray for you. When I say I'm going to pray, I do. But I don't do it the way you probably all think I do. I light a candle a lot of times. Or I just hold you in my heart, in light and in love. And that's my prayer.